the la la and the la la.
The what and the why?
It's all right. I didn't see our title. It's all right.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome back to the Take a Stand live event. This is an extraordinary event where I am talking to 35 women who are all sharing their stories of triumph over trauma. Now, these stories are personal, deeply personal stories. So if you feel that you need some extra support, please do make sure that you get the support you need. So reach out to your friends. If you don't feel that you can speak to your friends or family members, get yourself to the doctor. If you feel that the what you're feeling needs to be dealt with in the here and now, get yourself to the emergency services, A&E, we call it back home. In the UK, it might be something different where, depending on where you are listening to this recording around the world. But please just make sure that you get the help it is that you need. So if you are watching on YouTube, welcome back. This channel is all about living life trauma-free. If that topic interests you, please consider subscribing to the channel. Click that little notification bell and give us a thumbs up. And if you've got any questions, please pop them below in the chat box. If you resonate with Beverley's story and you want to have a chat, her details will be further below in the comments box. You can reach out to her just by reading through the description. Welcome to the live event, Beverley.
Hi, Wendy. Thank you for the invitation to come and talk with you today.
Yeah, great. I was just saying that it must be about 3 years, I think, since we've actually seen one another face to face this way, which is lovely. So it's nice to finally connect, which is great. Which part of the world are you in at the moment?
Right. So I'm currently in London at the moment, but as Wendy knows, I split my time between the US and the UK.
Yeah, nice. Nice. Do they have a difference in temperature? Because England, I understand, is cold, getting cold.
It has been. It's a little bit warmer today, which is really nice, but it has been chilly.
Well, at least you can go back over to the States and warm up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're still warm.
Yes.
Great. So let's get into the interesting part then. Could you share with us a story of triumph over trauma, not necessarily going into the detail, but just navigating our way through so people can have an understanding of your own unique experience?
Yeah. So I firstly wanted to just highlight, and I think it's really important to start here. So Wendy invited me to be one of the speakers, and I just wanted to share with you before I start how trauma can show up at any time. So last week, I had this moment where I was on the phone to Wendy and I was saying, oh my goodness, shall I do this? Shouldn't I do this? And there was this moment where I was like, I'm not going to come on and speak. But actually, there was that part, that really deep down part of myself that knew it was time to speak. So if I go back in my story in terms of trauma, my trauma, childhood trauma, probably started about the age of 4 or 5. And it was sexual abuse. And I share that openly in talks that I do with women, for women. But as I journey on in the work that I do with women, I find that it has an impact when women who are in their 50s, 60s, 70s even, have never spoken about it to anyone. They've held on to that shame, that guilt. They've held on to the stories that come with that. And in the work that I do now, it's very much about how that trauma impacts women and their relationship with money. But going back to my own story, so just picking out one element, a couple of elements of it, I usually use the and talk about an element of a story of me losing, and it seems really small, but it's actually quite important, losing dinner money in the school playground. The school dinner money had gone up and I wasn't aware. So I'd taken the money and I'd spent the additional money, and it came to a point where the money had to be accounted for. And the trauma for me started where I actually left the school, ran home to hide, and actually took quite a severe punishment from relatives. My grandma was looking after me at the time, and she called my mum, called my mum and dad who were at work. They were separated at the time, and they both came home from their jobs to deal with the matter. But in that moment, I actually felt so unloved as I was being punished. But it was something where the perpetrator of my abuse actually used that as a tool to groom and to say, well, actually, your family, they don't love you. But here, in what I do with you, is the love that you need. And I think it's important that, especially for myself, to share that grooming is done, so it's uniquely done, it's strategically done, it's a game that can be played, and especially when you're so young and you're so vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And you are feeling, my parents were separated, you were feeling a little bit abandoned, and someone says, I care, let me be your friend, let me be your main supporter. And for me, that abuse probably went on until I was maybe about 9 or 10. And I thought it was a game. I thought it was a game. And I don't know for others how abuse appears, because if you are so small, sometimes you don't know. Mm. And for many of the women that I speak to, it's not until we get to our teens. So for me, in my teens, I struggled with endometriosis. I struggled with infertility. And I began to think, oh my goodness, what have I done? What did I do to bring this on myself? But I want to take it back to our very first sex education at school. And I remember it like it was yesterday. The teacher, he drew the curtains in the science lab, put the screen on, told us to all be quiet. And then he started to show video of women's bodies, men's bodies, and then a video showing sexual intercourse. And in the middle of the video, he stopped the video and he said, if any of you in here do this before you are 18 and or you consent to this, then you are dirty. So I, in that moment, sat back in my chair, looked around and thought, wow, oh my goodness. I know about that. I can see that. I've done that. So I went into hiding. And I call it hiding because I became aware that as my girlfriends or school friends were starting to explore sexually, I wanted to like hold back. I was covering myself up because I didn't want to be visually seen. I slowly started to lose my voice, and really didn't want to have anything to do with boys or boys my age from that perspective. Moving through, it did impact how my relationship with men in my early 20s went, because I was very, very mindful of the fact that for me, going into a sexual relationship was more about, do I want this? Do I feel loved enough? Am I loving myself enough in this relationship, or am I just doing it because everyone else is doing it? I had miscarriages in my 30s, and so trauma consistently built up in my body and in my mind. In my body and in my mind. And as I flipped through my story, different elements of trauma came up for me. I was at Harrods on the day the IRA bomb went off in 1987. Getting out of that building on that day, that just created an impact of trauma that I think even to this day still triggers when you hear of war. When I hear of war, bombing, that still sits within me. And I think this is one of the things when we and I look at trauma, I know that for me, it isn't just one thing. It is, as ladies have been speaking about this week, it's a multitude of different things that add up. And I think in addition to that, I, being first generation Black in the UK, there was lots of challenges that I faced as a young Black woman, working in banking and finance industry in the City of London, working in organisations where, in some instances, I was the first Black person to work in those organisations. And the trauma builds. And what I found for me is that sometimes as the trauma built, it impacted my relationship with myself, and also then it impacted my finances if I wasn't well enough to be at work.
With the women that you work with, you said at the beginning that you do a lot of money around, not a lot of money, a lot of work around money trauma, money healing. Is there a common theme that those women present with, that when they initially first come to you, that there's like a common thread that is just, you know, it's unique to the women it is that you work with?
Yeah. Many come, they're at the point of, I call it a point of no return. So they're stuck between their comfort zone and their true calling. Many of them have done great work, but they're now tired of that, not necessarily that area of work, but how they can be more, expand more, be just flourish more. They're not happy. Something is missing. Many are carrying baggage from the past that they haven't resolved. Some it may mean that, you know, they can work with me. Some it may mean that they need trauma specialists and or counselors. But many are seeking something more. Many say that they feel broken. Many share stories of hurts that haven't been mended. They look at their own relationship with themselves. They look at their values and if their values have been fulfilled. And many stay in that place where they are in self-doubt because they've done so much giving and have been always in service to others, but they haven't been in service to themselves.
I think trauma and money is such a fascinating subject because it's like, you know, it's only probably in the last 5 or 6 years where I've actually acknowledged that I've held a lot of trauma around money. Mm-hmm. You know, not feeling worth enough, not being charging the right fees, undercharging, over delivering, not being, you know, not investing in myself. And that all comes from childhood trauma. That all comes from things that I hadn't been taught or lacked when I was growing up. And it's interesting because you don't hear many people talk about the trauma connection between people's experiences around money. So like being brought up in poverty, never having any money, having to choose between, I mean, I know people are talking about it now, but it was definitely my reality. I had to choose between heating or food. That was the choice, food or heating. So of course you choose food and you go without the heating. But that created a lot of trauma because it meant that with my money, I wasn't able to firstly see the value in myself and my own self-worth, which then impacted on the business. And I've forgotten what the second thing is. The second one's gone already. It's obviously not true anymore because I've forgotten it.
Yeah, and I think there is that correlation between, you know, our self-worth and money. And there's also, I mean, for myself, working in the city, working in banking, being made redundant twice in the 80s, high debt because of the lifestyle, keeping up with the Joneses. You're working in the city, you're keeping up with the Joneses, the debt that I had to deal with, the decision for myself not to go back into the banking industry, but to consider a different profession, which was more in line with my values around humanity and love, and working for charities in the UK for nearly 30 years. but specialising in I call it my unique gift around numbers, debt, teaching financial capabilities, doing debt work, specialising in social policy to make a difference for those who struggle because of financial pressures, doing campaigns where taking the lead on campaigns where we look at how people paid their bills. So, doing social policy work and inputting to make change so that people could pay their bills by direct debit, people could pay their bills by installments, making a great difference in terms of championing cases where women can get longer paid maternity leave, so you still have that time with with children if you decide that that's what you wanted to do. There was just so many aspects of money and the awareness of how we all sit and play at money. And I think there's also, and I call it an illusion, that money just stays at one level. There is a flow. Money flows in, money flows out, but many of us feel that if we don't feel we deserve it, or don't feel that it's right to have our portion, then we don't walk towards wanting more, because then we
That's a
feel
really
that
good point.
somebody else, if I
yeah,
take, someone else is going to lose out.
yeah. Yeah, it's such a fascinating conversation, and there's so many different angles to it. I used to do this really bad thing, and I see clients doing it all the time. I guess because I've seen it in myself, I see it in other people. But I used to do this really bad thing where I used to mix up my self-worth and my self-esteem with how much money I would make, where in reality they're actually two completely different things. But I would put the two things together, and because I didn't think I was worth anything, I obviously didn't move towards larger amounts of money, receiving larger amounts of money, because I didn't think I was worth it, which would then compound my self-esteem, my self-worth, my lack of confidence. Actually, not my lack of confidence, but self-esteem, self-worth. And I just get myself in this knot of just, I guess it's the poverty I experienced when I was younger, staying in that place of being stuck in the trauma of money and not being able to separate my self-worth, my self-esteem from actually how much money I was making. Mm-hmm. So I couldn't move towards anything. I was just basically paralyzed, not knowing how to bring more money in because I didn't think I was worth bringing more money in. Does that make sense?
It sure does. And that is where the stuck between your comfort zone and your vision comes. And I totally understand what you're talking about there. If we think about things that are said to us as children, well, money is bad, money is the root of all evil. I haven't, for many at times, our parents would say, well, I haven't got the money to afford, to pay for that. We can't afford that. You're not worth that much. And I know from myself and some clients, there was what you were wearing, what you were doing also shows an element of, well, oh, they haven't got any money, so they can't be my friend, or they look like this, so they can't be my friend. And all of those labels go into creating a lot of things around self-doubt, lack of confidence, And that feeling of, well, if I want more money, or if I want to pursue careers or a business where I'm making more money, am I being greedy? Am I being greedy? But to have a spin on that is to say, well, if you're thinking about what your calling, what your true calling is, and you're constantly stepping towards that and moving and thriving towards that, any money that you make, you've obviously got a purpose and a reason for why you're doing it.
Mm.
So if you're supporting a charity and your calling is to give half of your money to that charity because you'll have enough to do everything else you need to, then why not make the decision to step forward?
Yeah, it's mind-blowingly complex. Knowing what you know now, what would you say to your younger self?
I think for me, my younger self is, I would tell her, which I have done constantly over the last decades, is you're loved, you are worthy, you are unique, and so therefore you won't show up in the world the same as everybody else. You've got to be on your true path. You will get distractions, so be mindful of those, but you need to stay true to yourself as you walk through life.
Nice. I like that. I like that. What would you say is the biggest stumbling block for women who want to receive more money?
I think personally, the biggest stumbling block is the belief that you deserve to have more.
Yeah,
I think
and of
it's
course.
all, I think, yeah, and I think it's also understanding that you're not taking anything from anyone. If you do a great service, you are being rewarded for your work, your worth, what you bring to the table.
Mm.
And I think I find, because I work with a lot of women offline, many of them feel they do not want to show up visibly on online space, and that's okay. But it's also important for them to realize that the money is out there in the same way in the offline space as it is in the online space. Their work is valuable. So be prepared to honor that. And many of the women are empathic, and so therefore doing what I'm doing now is really scary.
Mm.
But I suppose it's them understanding that by whichever way they decide that they are going to open their voice and speak up and speak out, that's going to be the message that somebody needs to hear. So they're going to help somebody on their journey of healing, getting help that they need, moving through their own trauma.
Yeah. It's not easy. It's definitely not easy sharing stories like this. You know, you have to have done a good deal of work and be ready to share. I think if you haven't, then you just won't do it because you're just not ready. Your body or your brain won't actually allow you to do it. You'll come up with 1,001 excuses as to why it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, pushing through a little bit of resistance is okay. Pushing through a little bit of nervousness, a little bit of resistance is okay. But you just know, don't you? You just know it's my time for me to share my story, and this is how I choose to, and this is how I've chose to share it.
Yeah. Yeah. And as you've been speaking this week, it is about feeling that this is a safe space to share. I am not looking for anyone to judge me, make a decision. People will make decisions about what I've shared, who it will impact in terms of what I've shared today. But actually, it was important for me that there are greater parts to the story which I can't share here because for legal reasons, I can't share them here. But that impacted my life for 10 years.
Wow, long time.
10 years, what was going on in the background.
Yeah.
And I was still showing up at work, doing the client work and looking after others until eventually it was time to say, I need to stop.
Yeah.
So I think it's just imperative for everyone to be, you have to be ready. And I think for me, as we spoke about last week, my readiness is, I've just gone into my next decade. So yeah, I turned 60.
Oh yeah, happy birthday! Happy
Thank
birthday!
you.
It was yesterday, day before yesterday.
Sunday, yeah.
Sunday, yeah.
Yeah. So I turned 60 on Sunday, and well, what have I got to hide? Nothing. But who could I help?
Lots.
Even by somebody just hearing this and just saying, gosh, I've been hiding. I want to go and do some work. And I remember that it's probably about 15 years ago now when I had to go on this journey of, I say that I have constantly been on a journey of healing. I haven't just woken up today and felt healed. That's not the truth. Many people who meet me say, oh, you're always smiling. You're always in full color. You're always blooming. And I say, yes, because I get up every day and I do the work. And some days, if I don't feel like I can do the work, I don't. But it is a work in progress. It's a little bit like going to the gym. But I've done what I needed to do in terms of self-care, seeking support. And for me, why I do the work that I do around women and having those conversations around money is that very often there's a lot more stuff underpinning how a woman feels about her relationship with money, and we can make a start on unpicking it.
Yeah, fantastic. I love that. It should, in my mind, the type of work you do should be almost like one of the main building blocks to, I'm going to say running a business because that's the space that I'm in. And it's not, and it should be, because women, I think, would absolutely flourish if they understood this illusion we hold around money. I think women would be much more prosperous. They'd be much more abundant But it's just one of those things for some bizarre reason that we don't consider looking at when it would really actually should be one of the top 5 things you should have in your business is to understand, explore your relationship with money, and your story with money, to make sure it is in a healthy flow, not well and truly blocked. So it's just stuck.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. And taking women on that journey of giving themselves permission to not settle and to do themselves justice was very, very important for me to make that clear in writing last year, as you know, which was in terms of being assessed as dyslexic in my 50s. It was really painful to actually start writing that, it is a journey. We don't just arrive. We all go on a journey, and each stage of our journey, we will need help and support.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing your story and giving us insight into your world. Layer on layer upon layer on top of layer. Very difficult, very challenging to deal with. And I know some of it is, as you said, you're still dealing with some things even now in present day. So thank you so much for sharing that. We all really appreciate it.
Thank you. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to come on and make a difference. And as I'd say, if it's to help even one person to move forward, if they are feeling stuck, between their comfort zone and their calling, and are now ready to move from grayscale to full color, then I will be overwhelmed to hear from you in terms of how this supports and helps you change your life.
I love that. Grayscale to full color. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Grayscale to full color. It's so true as well, because when you step into that space of being able to expand and receive, everything becomes so much more colorful. You just see everything so differently.
Absolutely.
Yeah, nice. Reminds me of depression as well. When you go from being locked down in depression and then you move into full color. That's really nice. A really nice way to describe it. Okay.
Thank
you,
Wendy.
once again. Take care, lovely.
Thank you.